I actually have a story. The day before my birthday, I went water skiing, got up, skied like a professional. It was amazing. The day of my birthday, it did not go so well. It took 4 times to get up out of the water, and everyone was like, "You're 40 now. You're 40." But hey, someone that I just admire a lot, someone actually that is going to be preaching here today, I grew up with. He's a childhood friend. Is actually one of my brother's best friends. He was at the house all the time. This guy's 4 years younger than me, and I was jealous of him because this guy could slam dunk a basketball, spit rhymes like a rapper, and actually had a... When I was a school teacher, he was a youth pastor in Spokane, and then when I became a pastor, we kind of did this, man. His ministry is at the public school in Brewster. He's a middle school history and English teacher, and preaches at his church occasionally, and just does an amazing job. And it's just an honor. Would you guys help me in welcoming Kyle Wilbur? Let's pray for this guy.
Amen. All right. Thank you, Josh. I appreciate that. Hey, and Josh, it's actually 5 years. I'm only 35. So now that you're 40, it's 5 years. So we got to get that right. I was not in high school when you were in high school. I'm sorry, sir. Ouch. Hey, good morning. How we doing? You guys doing all right? Well, as Josh said, my name is Kyle Wilbur. I'm a 7th grade language arts and Washington State history teacher in a small town called Brewster. Who knows where Brewster is in the room? Oh, wow. 7 of you. That's awesome. If you don't know where Brewster is, that's all right. 99% of the state has no idea where Brewster is. If this is Washington State, there's the Olympic Peninsula, is my thumb there. Brewster's right up here in my middle knuckle. Okay, so just a little geography lesson of the state for you guys. Kennewick is right down here on your middle bottom wrinkle there, so just so you know. My wife, Tiffany, and I have been married for coming up on 8 years, so give it up for marriage. That's awesome. Yes, we're moving past the 7-year itch, as they call it, so is what I hear. It's smooth sailing now. No problems, no issues. If you can get to year 8, you'll be okay. I'm a father. I have 2 boys. My first son, Camden, is going to be 4 on Friday, so that's pretty exciting. He's going to be 4 years old. And then my second son, Roman, he just turned 1 in April. So father of 2 boys, figuring new things out every single day, and being a dad is so great. So a little bit about my family, and I talked to a few of you guys, and you actually remembered me from the last time, so that's a good sign, or a bad sign. I don't know, one or the other there. But they say the best indicator of how you perform is if you get the call back. Okay, the first time, you always know how good you do or bad you do if you get the call back or don't get the call back. So you guys must have lied to Josh when he was gone and said, hey, that guy did a decent job. So this is my callback. So thank you guys so much for having me come back here. But truthfully, I have a huge heart for Crossview and for the ministry that you guys are doing here. As Josh said, him and I go way back. Actually, Josh's mom was my elementary school PE teacher. Josh's dad was my 8th grade basketball coach. And as Josh said, his younger brother, Jonathan, and I, we actually walked down the aisle of graduation together 17 years ago now. So I graduated 17 years ago. Kennewick Lion, by the way, so just so you guys know. My roots are, oh wow, an applause for the Kennewick Lions, awesome. My roots go deep in Kennewick. I have a heart for this city because it's where I was raised. So I have a heart for you guys because you're pouring in and ministering and loving on the community that I was raised in. So I just found this out. This is the first sermon of the sermon series you guys are starting on the book of Psalms. Is that right? Number 1. So kicking it off, here we go. Let's get it done here. Hopefully I set things up nice and low for the guys to follow me. So, but I do preach at my church. I do messages here and there in my community. And it's always fun when someone calls you up and asks you to preach and they say, hey, the topic is yours. Whatever you want to preach on. I say, okay, that's awesome. What are you guys doing? They say, we're working through the book of Psalms. There's 150 different Psalms. I don't know if you guys know that. So it can be a little overwhelming when you hear, hey, just pick one. Just choose the one you like the best. Now, Psalm 119 is the longest chapter in the Bible. It's 176 verses. So I promise you we're not doing that one this morning, okay? I'm not going to do that one. So I got 149 options to choose from. So I did what any Bible scholar would do. I played a little Bible roulette, right? Closed my eyes, opened my Bible, stuck my finger in there. Hope that's a good one. No, I didn't like that one. Closed my eyes, opened my Bible. That didn't go so well for me. So I grabbed my Bible, and this is a Bible that I've had since college. And in my Bible, I noticed there was a little piece of Scotch tape on one of the pages. So I said, that's kind of weird. So I opened it up, and on that page, there was one psalm that was completely underlined. Now, why I underlined it, when I underlined it, I have no idea. But apparently, my brain knew on July 7th in 2019, I would need a psalm to pick to preach to you guys here at Crossview. So Psalm 127 it is. So we're going to go ahead and get busy on 127 this morning. Now, the kind of the cool thing about the book of Psalms is it's a collection of writings. It's not necessarily one story like you see in other books, but it's a collection of writings from various authors. Now, one of the main authors is going to be this dude, King David. Now, King David is known as one of the greatest kings to ever rule in Israel. And then there's also some other authors that we know and don't know kind of dispersed throughout the book. And the book itself is different styles of writing. So you have actual songs. So some of the songs that you guys might sing here at Crossview are actually based on Psalms, in the book Psalms. There's poems. People have written poems. There's actual prayers of people. And there's other different styles of writing in there. And this morning, the psalm that we're looking at is written by the son of King David. And his name is Solomon. So as we read this morning, as we go through it this morning, my hope is, and I'm going to try to do my best to explain it, but my hope is that you wouldn't hear my words. You wouldn't hear this as Kyle Wilbur, but you would hear the words of the king, King Solomon, one of the greatest kings to ever rule Israel. So as you kind of read it this morning, kind of take that lens that these are not my words, but the words of the king. So we're going to read it top to bottom. Psalm 127, it's only 5 verses, so don't get overwhelmed if you're like top to bottom. Only 5 verses, but I'm going to read it in its entirety, and we're going to kind of break it down verse by verse. Psalm 127, verse 1. Unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchman stays awake in vain. It is in vain that you rise up early and go late to rest, eating the bread of anxious toil, for he gives to his beloved sleep. Behold, children are a heritage from the Lord, the fruit of the womb a reward. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior are the children of one's youth. Blessed is the man who fills his quiver with them. He will not be put to shame when he speaks with his enemies in the gate. Now, it would be easy, I say easy, but not necessarily easy, for me to walk through this passage through my eyes, right? I'm a mid-30s. I just turned 35. I drive a minivan, married dude, got 2 kids kind of guy, right? It'd be fairly easy for me to do that, but I think it's important that we see it through the author's eyes. And the author is Solomon. Now, trust me, Solomon has a way cooler resume than I have. Okay? Solomon is one of the greatest kings to ever rule Israel. It's historically recorded. Throughout his reign, some of the best years financially, judicially, as he ruled the nation. Okay? As I said, he's one of the wealthiest kings to ever rule Israel. They actually figured it out. Dude's way smarter than me, kind of put the pieces of the puzzle together, and they found out if you did it in today's American money, Solomon would be worth $23.2 trillion. That's trillion with a T, right? Eat your heart out, Zuckerberg, or whoever that is. Who's the Amazon guy, Jeff? There we go. Eat your heart out, dude. You ain't got nothing on Solomon, right? $23.2 trillion. And one of my favorite stories about Solomon's wealth is when he used to throw parties, he would throw some parties, right? He would butcher an entire herd of cattle to feed the people that would come to his party. Now, I think I'm pretty cool when I go to my wife and I'm like, hey, honey, pick up the big size bag of hamburgers at Costco, right? Solomon would throw a party and kill off an entire herd of cattle to feed the people who would come. And his parties, they weren't just a one-night thing. It wasn't just like, oh, that was a great night we had. No, these things would go on for days, if not weeks, and hundreds of thousands of people would come and attend his parties. He was also one of the wisest kings to ever live. It's recorded in the Bible that he came to Solomon and he said, Solomon, I'm going to give you one thing. Anything you ask for, I'll give it to you. And Solomon said, God, I want your wisdom on things. I want to think like you think. And so it's historically recorded that leaders, kings, rulers would come to Solomon when they'd have a tough situation that they needed to figure out. And he would get paid by these people to give him his wisdom. I'm telling you, this dude was a baller, okay? He understood the game. So as we read this morning, I want you to hear the words of one of the wisest, the richest, the ballerific ballers to ever walk this earth. So here we go, back to verse 1. Unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchman stays awake in vain. Now, this is a guy who had not one house, but multiple palaces. He didn't rule over one city, but he ruled over nations. And he is saying in this first verse, if God ain't in it, it's not worth it. And he uses one of his favorite words, vain. And vain just means it's all about you. It's only about them. And this is a guy who it could have been all about him. He had fame, he had wealth, he had power, he had like 900 and something wives, so he was probably a pretty good looking dude, right? He had the physical thing going on. And he's saying, look, if God isn't in the mix of what you're doing, it's not going to work. It's not going to work out for you. And I think we've all been in this place at some point in our lives where we've made that decision that was simply based on our wants and our needs and what we wanted. And in the end, it didn't go the way we wanted it to go. For some of us, it probably turned out pretty bad. You know, we go where we shouldn't go. We send that text message to the person that we know we shouldn't be texting. We stay out a little bit later than we probably should. We're staying with the person that we know and everybody else is telling us that we probably shouldn't be with. And then Psalm is saying, look, if you're making that decision based on you, number one, it's only going to be about you. And number two, it's probably going to go bad for you. This probably isn't going to end up the way you want it to. But there's another side of it here, that if we put God in the middle of things, if we allow God to raise up the home, if we allow God to watch over the city. Remember, this is one of the wisest guys to ever live. And he's saying in order for it to work, you got to trust God first. In the end, it boils down to, do you trust God first? It's about trust. The relationship here is about trust. But talking about building a house, now I've never done it, and I probably never will do it. If you ever see me trying to build a house, run, do not enter that house, because I'm one of the most mechanically uninclined people you will ever meet. But building a house is a hard job. My wife's dad, he's a contractor, that's what he does. He goes in, he buys houses, and he rebuilds them. And never once has he went in there by himself and said, I got this. Nope, it's all on me. This one, I got it. He always brings in his team. He always brings in experts and other professionals to help him do it. Watching over a city all by yourself, building a house all by yourself, that's going to get exhausting. You're going to get tired. You're going to get run down. You're going to get worn out. Having to keep your eye on one end of the city here, one end of the city there, all by yourself, man, that's going to be tiring. And I had a situation happen 2 weeks ago in my life that was completely out of my hands. And I wanted it so bad to be in my control. My son Camden, my 4-year-old, had to go in for some dental work. And because the dental work was a little extensive, they had to put him under in order to do it. He had to get anesthesia so he wouldn't be asking a million questions. Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? Or crying or whatever. So he had to get completely knocked out. And so we showed up at the doctor at 5:20 a.m. in Wenatchee, which is an hour drive from Brewster. So we had to get up at roughly 3:30 in the morning in order to get him to his appointment. And when we went in, the nurse took our information, and then she grabbed my son Camden, and she began leading him to the back by himself. And I kind of went into dad mode a little bit. My wife, she went into supermom mode a little bit. She was like, hey, wait a minute. Don't we get to go back with him for the procedure? And the girl, she kind of gave me a smirk, which made me even madder. She said, hey, no parents are allowed back during the procedure. It was completely out of my hands in this moment. I had to trust the trained professionals to do what they had been trained to do. Now, this was not easy for me. Giving control over was not an easy thing for me. And my wife, she probably felt a little bit of the frustration that was going on in my heart. And I know the doctor came in, or the doctor did, the doctor came in after, and I had 150 questions ready to go, right? What happened? How did he do? What? And she's going, oh, calm down, buddy. Calm down, buddy. Just trying to say good morning to you. We haven't even started the procedure yet. But here's the deal. If I would have been back there and something had went wrong, what could I have done to help? Right? In all actuality, I probably would have made the situation a lot worse for the doctors and a lot worse for my son. Just in case you guys were wondering, everything went great. The procedure was awesome. I don't know teeth. I don't know anything about teeth surgery, right? If I would have been back there and something would have went wrong, I would have made it so much more of a mess for the doctors and even worse for my own kid. Sometimes when we don't trust God with a situation in our life, we make the situation a lot more worse than we should. You guys with me this morning? Now, there has to be a balance, right? I didn't just slap my kid on the butt. Hey, good luck, buddy. Your mom and I are going to go get some Starbucks. We'll see you in a couple hours. I was right there waiting when he came out. My wife was right there to wrap him in her arms and hold him as he was coming out of the anesthesia. I was asking the right questions of the doctor. But at some point, I had to trust the doctors to do what they were trained to do. At some point, we got to be willing to trust God, what he is so much better at than we are. God is so much better at life than we are. He is so much more trained at this than we are. And you know how I know this? Because of Jesus. Jesus lived the perfect life while he was here on this earth. In Matthew, which is a book written by one of Jesus' best buddies, a dude that walked, talked, did life with Jesus. After Jesus died and rose again, Matthew sat down and he wrote the words of Jesus. He wrote the life of Jesus. And he said this, quoting Jesus, "You therefore must be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect." God is not some rookie at this life thing. God is actually perfect at it. He doesn't make mistakes. He doesn't drop the ball. But the big question is, do we trust him to take the reins of our lives? Do we trust him in those situations that we don't want to let go of? Do we trust him to do the things that he's so much better at than we are? Verse 2, "It is in vain that you rise up early and go to late rest, eating the bread of anxious toil, for he gives to his beloved sleep." How many of us love a good night's rest? Hey, I see hands in the back there. It's just the best, right? When you get a good night's sleep, when you sleep those full 8, 9, 10, 12 hours, whatever it is you're sleeping, right? It's just the best. My wife, she would totally agree with you guys that I am a better person when I get a full night's sleep. When she knows that I'm well rested, I'm a better person to be around. I'm less irritable. I'm slower to get frustrated. I'm able to focus more. I'm slower to get defensive. I'm willing to listen rather than just wanting to put my own thinking or my own thoughts to someone as they're talking. Maybe I'm the only one. Am I the only one in the room that's like this? Psalm is saying, if you're doing this all on your own, sun up to sundown, no rest, it's going to get exhausting. You're going to get tired. You're going to get overworked. You're going to get worn down. And if you're exhausted, you worry so much more. That anxious toil, it's just worry. You're so much more of a warrior when you're tired. And in fact, your brain can start to spin things so far out of control that it doesn't even look like the truth anymore. Right? You walk by your friend. Hey, how's it going? Good. Normal person would go, oh, they're good. Right? You're tired. All of a sudden, you're like, wait a minute, they didn't ask me how I'm doing. Wait a minute, they didn't say it in a pepper and happy voice. Wait a minute, maybe they're mad at me. Wait a minute, maybe I did something to hurt them. Maybe they're going to unfriend me on Facebook. I don't know, right? But our brain can start to spin those things out of control when we're tired. But here's the good news from Solomon, who should be the most tired guy in the world. He's leading nations. He's leading countries. He's making big decisions. And he says, for he gives to his beloved sleep. When God is at the front of our decisions, when God is at the head of our lives, he gives to his beloved sleep. And God is not selfish. God is a giving God, and he gives us rest. He gives to his beloved sleep. One of my favorite stories about Jesus is when Jesus is out in the middle of the ocean with all his buddies, the disciples, and Jesus goes down to go to sleep. And in the middle of the night, the storm kind of sets in, the waves rise up, the winds start pushing the ship around, and the disciples, they start freaking out. They go into panic mode. We're not going to make it. We're not going to get across. Something bad's going to happen. And Matthew, the same dude that wrote the book of Matthew, he says this about Jesus. But he was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. Jesus was sound asleep when the world around him was getting out of hand. And the disciples, they run into Jesus, and I'm sure they're in a panic mode. Jesus, get up, get up. And I just have this picture of Jesus kind of getting up, kind of stretching a little bit. He walks out to the deck of the ship, puts his hand up, and says, stop. The waves go down, the winds stop, the storm or the clouds kind of part. The feeling of being out of control for the disciples ended the moment Jesus said stop. And then Jesus, he says, why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith? Don't you know who's in the boat with you? Why are you panicking so much about some silly storm? I got this. See, when our hope is in ourselves to calm the storms of our lives, it just gets worse. But when we trust God to calm those storms in our lives, Solomon says it, for he gives to his beloved sleep. Wouldn't it be so nice to be able to sleep on the cushion when the storms are brewing in our lives? Solomon did it. The man with 1 million more worries than we probably had. Why can't we? Now, Solomon, he's going to kind of switch gears a little bit in the middle of this Psalm 3, 4, and 5. And I think it's a good change because I think Solomon's going to touch on some pretty important issues that are relevant today. Solomon's going to focus on children and parents. Now, if you're sitting here thinking, well, I'm neither one of those, come see me afterwards. I'll explain to you how the life cycle works. Because you're either one or the other. So Solomon's going to have some words of wisdom for us this morning. So verse 3, behold, children are a heritage from the Lord, the fruit of the womb a reward. And this is a great reminder from Solomon that children should be and looked at as a reward. You know, today, too many kids, and I work in the public school system. I'm a 7th grade teacher. Too many kids are looked at as burdens. And Solomon is saying here this morning to us, that should never be the case. Children are a blessing from God, something to be cherished and treasured, just like a reward should be. You know, last month, the Toronto Raptors won their first NBA championship. Go Canada, right? And this was a big deal because it was the first international championship won in NBA history. The championship trophy now sits on foreign grounds. And one of the coolest things I saw during this time was one of the Toronto Raptors' true stars. His name's Kyle Lowry. He was drafted by the team. He spent his whole career with the team. He went everywhere with that championship trophy. The presentation of it, he was one of the first guys to grab the trophy. On the plane ride home, you follow him on Snapchat or Instagram, all right, there's pictures of him with the trophy on the plane. In the parade, he was carrying the trophy. That trophy represented all the hard work, the practice, the extra hours that he had put in to the city of Toronto and to the team of Toronto. That trophy was his reward for all of his hard work. That reward meant something to him. And Solomon is saying, children are a reward. It should mean something to us. It should matter to us on so much more of a higher level than an NBA championship trophy. Now, I don't know, I know you guys do this online, so Kyle Lowry, if you ever watch this, I'm not downgrading your NBA championship, but I'm saying children matter. Children are a reward. Yet I hear things like, that was the oops child, or he was a surprise, or even worse, that kid was a mistake. And I'm going to stand by Solomon's words this morning. I'm going to say that should never be the case. And if you're sitting in this room this morning and you felt that burden, that is not your burden to carry, and I am so deeply sorry if that has been laid on you. That is not who you are. And the God of the universe believes that with all his heart. You are a prize. You are a treasure. You are a reward. And God believes that with all his heart. Solomon quotes God saying, you matter. You are a reward and you should be valued and appreciated as a reward. Verse 4, like arrows in the hand of a warrior are the children of one's youth. Now, I know about as much about hunting as I do about fixing houses. Little to none. It's not my craft. It's not my thing. I just don't get it. But I do know one thing about archery, and that is in order to be a successful archer, person who shoots a bow and arrow, you have to have a sharp arrow. The arrow has to be sharp in order to penetrate whatever the target is. And at this time, you didn't go down to Sportsman's and buy a whole sheath. What do they call a bundle of arrows? I don't know. You didn't go down to Sportsman to pick that up. A quiver, thank you, of arrows. You had to make the arrows. You had to do the hard work. That means you had to shape them. You had to carve them. You had to mold them just right in order for them to fly and hit or penetrate the target. And I hope I'm kind of making sense here a little bit to the parents in this room, but as parents, it's our job to help shape and mold our kids. It's our job to shape and mold those arrows so they work in the battle. Because when it comes to archery, the arrow doesn't do the work. The archer does the work. The archer loads the arrow, pulls the arrow, shoots the arrow. The archer's the one doing the work. So it's our job as parents to do the work when it comes to raising our kids. So parents, I'm going to speak kind of directly to you. And remember, I am one. So I take as much from this message and this sermon as you guys do. But if you're a kid or a young married couple, don't tune me out, because this matters right now. We have a responsibility to help guide our children, to lead them up in the right ways, the best way that we possibly can. This means that we have to put serious thought into our own lives. And this doesn't just start as a parent. This starts right now with the decisions that you're making. Because hear me, the struggles that we face today have a chance to directly impact the lives of our children. You know, alcoholism, it runs deep in my family roots on both sides, my mom's side as well as my dad's side. This is a generational struggle for my families. And you know, I could have so easily fallen into this. Turning 21, being away from home. It was easy, accessible for me in college. But 25 years ago, my dad, he made the decision to be the difference maker. He made the decision to put my brother, my sister, my mom, and me first when it came to this struggle. And he looked at it and he said, this will not be the lives of my kids. And this will not be the lives of my grandkids. And because of that decision that my dad made 25 years ago, alcoholism will not be a struggle that I have to deal with. And bigger than that, it will not be a struggle that my kids have to deal with. Now, was this an easy decision for him? No. Did it come with challenges? Absolutely. But his decision to overcome this not only helped and shaped my life, but it's going to help and shape the lives of my two boys. Seeing him overcome and walk out of the struggle, it gave me strength when I was facing those challenges in my own life, when I had my own personal struggles in my walk. And I know he's going to hate me for doing this, but my dad, he's sitting in this room, and Dad, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for putting me, Carrie, Keith, Mom, first when it came to this struggle. Because you doing that made me a better man. It's going to make my kids better men. And so I thank you for that, Dad. And if you don't have kids right now, or maybe you are a kid, how are you preparing your kids for the future? Or how are you preparing your future kids for the future? How are you setting your kids up to avoid the same struggles that you faced today? And I work with youth all the time. And here's the biggest struggle that I see today, and that's the struggle with sexual addiction. Pornography, promiscuity, immodesty, worldly pressures that are being put on our kids to grow up way too fast. And this is an addiction that runs through the bloodlines. Hey, just like alcoholism, just like drug abuse, hey, sexual addiction runs through the bloodlines. So to sit here and say that, oh, you know what, I'll figure that out when I have kids, or you know what, right now, it's just kind of all about me. I'm just going to kind of do me right now. And that's like saying that you're going to walk out of Columbia Park and try to stop the Columbia River from flowing, right? The smart thing would be to go to its source, hey, way up in the mountains, and stop it there. There's no way you're going to stop it out there. I hate to break it to you, but it just doesn't work like that. And I don't want to be harsh this morning. I know I'm a guest speaker, but the decisions that you make today, the struggles that you're dealing with today, could directly impact the lives of your children. You have to want to be the difference, not only for your life, but for your future kids' lives or your future grandkids' lives. And here's the great news. You can be the difference. You can make the difference in the lives of your future kids and your future grandkids. And that's good news. That's something to celebrate. Hey, I can be a difference maker. So in the middle of the struggle, yeah, it sucks. But sometimes we got to look at it and go, you know what? This matters now because in the future, it's not going to matter to my kids. Amen? That's good news. That's exciting. That helps when I'm struggling. That helps build me up. You know what? I can do this because it's not going to be an issue for my kids. You know what? I can overcome this because I don't want my kids to struggle with this. And then verse 5, our last verse, Solomon says, "Blessed is a man who fills his quiver with them. He shall not be put to shame when he speaks with his enemies in the gates." And some of you young married couples may have just made eyes at each other and went, all right, it's time to start making some arrows. Let's get going, right? Or maybe some of you older married couples are like, all right, hey, we're not done here. Hey, but let me just tell you, nothing that I've read in my studies says that Psalm is talking about making more babies. Now, if you're young and married and you want to take it as that, great. You can say, hey, remember that guy on that Sunday morning said that one thing that one time? And whatever. You can take it however you want it. But I'm just saying, from my understanding of the scripture, Solomon's focus here is arrows. And what he's saying is, it's way better to have a couple quality arrows than 25 jacked up arrows. Are you with me? But he does say this, that when you have a quiver full of solid arrows, you will not be put to shame. Now, our arrows might not always fly as straight as we want them to. Sometimes, as we let them go, the wind kind of pushes our arrows off the direction. But when our focus is the quality of the arrows, when our focus is about raising our kids the right way, we will never be put to shame. God knows our hearts. God is always in our corner here. God sees who you are. And God is constantly working behind the scenes, even when we're not at our best. When the focus is our kids, not about us, when our hearts are about helping them be the best people that they can possibly be, we will not be put to shame. God's going to honor that. God's going to honor the efforts that you're making, and God's going to be there step and step and step with you along the way. Now, whether or not you buy into this whole Christian thing, right? I'm not here to judge. That's not my job. It's not Josh's job. It's not Chad's job. Hey, but here's a couple things I just want you to kind of think about as we kind of round the corner to the end here. Don't you get tired of worrying all the time? Don't you wish you could get just a little bit more rest? Don't you wish you could see and value your kids as the reward that they are? Don't you wish you could figure out the way to kind of lead and guide your kids on the correct path? Don't you wish that you could hold your head high, knowing that your kids are walking in the character that you have ingrained in them since they were young? You know, Christian or not, I think we would all love to have a little bit more of this in our lives. And God gets it. And remember, God is way better at this whole life thing than we are. And God, he looked down the timeline of human history. And he knew that we would not be able to do this on our own. And instead of just kind of sitting back, I hope they figure it out, God did something about it. Jesus Christ, he came to this earth. He came to this earth not for himself, but for each and every one of us. Knowing the pain and the suffering that he had to endure, he still did it. And this is what kind of blows my mind about the gospel, and especially now that I have a son that I call my own. That God sent his son not to just die for the sins of those who loved and appreciated him and who worshiped him, but for those who would beat, spit upon him, ridicule him, and eventually murder him. One of Jesus' best buddies, Peter, he's quoted in his book saying this, "For Christ also suffered once for sins, the righteous for the unrighteous, so that he might bring us to God, being put to death in the flesh, but made alive in the spirit." You know, I remember when my son Camden was first born. He was like 5 or 6 weeks old, and I was trying to give Mama a rest, so I was taking him for a little walk around the neighborhood in the stroller. And I remember walking him, just kind of thinking. I mean, he wasn't really doing much yet, so I wasn't having a conversation, but I was kind of thinking, and I remember thinking, what would it take for me to give up this boy? And remember, I'd only known him for 5 or 6 weeks, really, since he'd been in the world. And as I thought about it, and as I kind of pondered it, the answer was nothing. I would give this kid up for nothing. Not for all of Solomon's money, I wouldn't have done it. Yet God looked at his son, Jesus Christ, his firstborn, his only son, with that same look that I was looking at my son Camden with. And he looked at his son and he said, "I'll give it up for you." I'll give it up on their behalf. Knowing what his son had to go through, knowing what his son had to deal with, knowing the beating, the bruises, the cross that he would have to shoulder and walk up the hill in which he'd be crucified on. God said, I'll do it for them. That's crazy love that God has for you. And I didn't have that same perspective that I have now that I have my own son. That God would do that for us, that God would do that for you, that God loved you so much that he sent his only son to live the perfect life that we couldn't live, to die the death that we deserve, to be placed on a cross, to be laid in the grave, to rise up 3 days later, showing us that he not only came, but he overcame the grip that sin had in our lives. And the good news here is it's a free gift. And it boils down to that trust that Solomon was talking about. Do you trust God to be the head of your life? Do you trust God to build the house in your life? I encourage you guys, if you haven't made that step of trust into him, that's the greatest step you'll ever take. My pastor back home, he has this saying, he says, Jesus Christ makes your life better and makes you better at life. Is it always easy? No. But it truly is better. So I encourage you, if you haven't had that conversation at least, get with Josh, get with Chad. If you feel like you can talk to me, come talk to me, but grab someone you trust and know and say, you know, I'm tired. I need some rest. Let me pray for you guys, and then I think Chad's going to come up and send us out. Lord,